Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Dinners by candlelight, an altogether very familiar sight, occurrence in Zimbabwe. But it is no longer romantic. Particularly when you realize that these power cuts are not just affecting the individual in their home who will have to put up with going to bed early or sit in the dark. This is affecting the country's industry, the ability to produce wealth. What is making the present situation even more unpalatable is that last year, Zimbabwe commissioned Hwange Unit number 7 and 8 at a cost of US $1.4 billion. There was the usual song and dance about it. And the nation was told that load shedding is a thing of the past. And now the nation learns that there's been persistent load shedding because these two units, new as they are not always on stream. And now the Chinese who build these two units are threatening to switch them off altogether. Why? Well, they want to be paid. Many Zimbabweans know that this Hwange Unit 7 and 8 was awarded to the Chinese without the usual open tender and usual transparency in the awarding of that tender and execution of it. So it was almost certain that the Chinese were paid over the odds for those Unit 7 and 8. The nation paid an arm and a leg for Hwange Unit 7 and 8. And now the nation is being told that the Chinese are back demanding more. This time they want the head in a silver platter. This is totally unacceptable. But this is to be expected. At the heart of Zimbabwe's problem is our failure to govern ourselves. Here is the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, talking to that very point.
Countries are not rich in proportion to their natural resources. If they were, Russia would now be the richest country in the world. Angola would be very rich, and there are many other countries that have a lot of natural resources, but they have not had an enterprise economy to develop those resources. Russia has everything: oil, gas, diamonds, platinum, gold, silver, timber, marvelous soil, but has been poor. She's also, on the second point, got very bad environment, the Aral Sea. I remember going to one communist country in about the 60s and seeing a power coming out of a chimney of brown gas, which of course is a nitrous gas. And I was absolutely horrified. I said, well, what are you doing letting that happen? The lungs of the people must be terrible. This is acid. You can't let that go on. Tact has never been my strong point, as you know. And It is the countries that have had the wrong system, which have not created the wealth, have not cared about people. Look at the other side. Japan, no natural resources. Switzerland, no natural resources. Taiwan, no natural resources. It is the political system which enhances the enterprise of the people and gives it a framework within which to operate, which will deal with this poverty.
We cannot deny that ever since country's independence in 1980, Zimbabwe has been on the economic decline, all because we failed to govern ourselves. We have got to deal with this problem. We cannot keep on hiding from it. The Chinese have taken advantage of our failure to run our own affairs. When we could not borrow from the international institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the Chinese were happy to step in. This is during Mugabe's time. And he adopted his look east policy. What happened? They let us get deeper and deeper into debt. And knowing fully well that we could not go anywhere else to borrow money, they allowed us to borrow money and got into more and more financial problems. Hwange Stage Unit 7 and 8 should have been open tender. How can you award a project worth $1.4 billion without open tender? It beggars belief. And now, even after we had paid over the odds for those units, we find the Chinese are coming back. They know that Zimbabwe at this point in time, we're absolutely desperate to keep at least a few industries that are still running, operational. Switching off Hwange Unit 7 and 8 would kill off those few industries that are still running. That is the head I'm talking about. And no doubt, the Chinese are also well aware that this threat will force the ZANU-PF regime to give up control and ownership of Zimbabwe's key industry, energy producing sector. The Chinese have done this in other countries. They lend you money, they get you up to your neck in debt, and then they demand that you give up control and ownership of key of your industries. This is where we are going. I would like to go back to how did we get here. Here is Dr. Sibama Koni explaining to Trevor Nuwe how Zimbabwe got into this mess.
I recall very clearly that when we came into office in 1980, we inherited Ian Smith's systems. And Ian Smith's ministers drove Peugeot 504s. They drove themselves from home to work in their Land Rovers and all in kinds. Most of them were farmers. They parked their Land Rover and then they used the government vehicle when they were at work with a chauffeur. When they finished at night, they packed them and they took theirs to go home. Within the month of our coming into office, Prime Minister Mugabe then directed that every minister be issued with an E-class Mercedes-Benz. And the Peugeot 504s were retired to permanent secretaries, and the deputy ministers who then took over. We can also look at many other things, small they may appear at the time. Let me hazard that even at that point, Enos Nkala was our Minister of Finance. I don't think we knew what budget we inherited from Ian Smith when the decision was taken to buy those E-class fleets for the ministers. So the material affection for material things has always been with us. And the differentiation also, even going back into the camps, Zemashefu, my comrades Makada were not the same. So much so that even today, when the so-called Minister for Presidential Affairs or Provincial Governor, as they were, goes to Bubi or Binga, they will be served separately and differently from the other people. The avarice grew as we began to exploit the opportunities of office. When I was in the government, the minister was allocated one vehicle that they kept, which was the sedan they used in town. If you needed to go off-road, then your ministry hired off-road vehicles from the CMED, and you were charged for it. Now a minister will have an average of 4 vehicles in his forecourt, all at government's expense.
So the leadership modeled the wrong kind of behavior, and that kind of behavior permeated all across our society. Our CEOs, like you're saying, heads of parastatals and so forth, modeled from the top.
Indeed. Indeed. I made a passing reference that we have CEOs who will buy themselves a luxury car when they can't pay wages at the end of the week or end of the month. This has been so entrenched in our psyche, this showing off, as if you are a different person. You're breathing different air from those who don't drive Prados and Land Cruisers, from those who don't drive Jeep Cherokees. We have lost our humanity. There's lots of reference to Ubuntu.
Well, he is absolutely right there. We have lost our humanity. Zimbabwe's problems are not new. We had the opportunity in the last 44 years to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. We failed to do so. Particularly during the 2008 to 2013 GNU, when we had the golden opportunity to do so. What happened? Well, Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and company with the same trappings of high office that he had bribed his fellow ZANU-PF officials when they got into government. Tsvangirai and company were given the E-class Mercedes-Benz, very generous salaries and allowances. And for Tsvangirai himself, the US $4 million mansion in Islands, etc., etc. And when you are looking out of the window, the rose-tinted windows of an E-class limousine, air-conditioned, the world looks different. Morgan Tsvangirai and company forgot about the reforms completely. Indeed, some of the ZANU-PF cronies were asked during the GNU, why are MDC failing to implement reforms? And they boasted, Mazwane MDC adziza kujuka anyerere. MDC leaders have learned to enjoy the gravy train, the good life of the gravy train. They will never rock the boat. Of course, those guys were right. MDC guys failed to implement even one democratic reform. I think what makes that particular situation even more tragic is that millions of ordinary Zimbabweans failed to realize what was going on. And indeed, some of them refused to accept that the opposition is corrupt, incompetent, and in some cases, downright liars. I'll just finish this program with a situation where our friend, Nelson Chamisa, was confronted with his own lies, and he still maintained that he did not say it.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election, $15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Kasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
That is a problem. Our problem in Zimbabwe is one of bad governance. And nations like the Chinese have taken advantage of that. And they've come in initially pretending that they are going to help Zimbabwe. And now they're taking over. Now they're holding the whole nation to ransom. Zimbabwe is not going to get out of this political and economic mess we are in without doing something to end our failed political system. The opportunities to end the failed political system has been there. It's just that we don't have our eyes open to see it. At the present moment, the opportunity to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship exists. If people do not participate in another flawed election 2028, and thus deny ZANU-PF political legitimacy, we will deny ZANU-PF political legitimacy and put ourselves in a position where we can go back to another GNU and implement the democratic reforms. That opportunity is there. We just need to seize it. At the present moment, the biggest danger is that no meaningful reforms will be implemented between now and 2028. Chamisa and company will participate in 2028 and con millions of their followers to participate. And as long as millions of people participate and give ZANU-PF political legitimacy, we cannot we have only ourselves to blame. We cannot turn around to SADC and say, oh, SADC should have helped. What do you want SADC to do? Why are you participating in a flawed election, which you have been told countless of times that it is flawed and that you need reforms to be implemented? If you're so ignorant, naive, and gullible to be conned into participating in flawed elections on the basis that Chamisa and company have devised strategies of winning rigged elections, then you deserve to suffer. Thank you very much, those of you who were able to join, and have a good night.